I actually was here as an attendee last year. I was very impressed with the work that this HIMSS chapter is doing. I've been on the board of the South Florida HIMSS chapter for years prior to moving to Dallas, where I'm now active with the Dallas HIMSS chapter. And so I'm very impressed with the work that the HIMSS chapter has done here. The obvious leadership, the great show of support. This is one of the largest HIMSS chapters in the country. So I commend you on the great work that you're doing. Great work that you're doing. I was excited about the opportunity to speak on the subject both of the regulatory environment and security as well. My background is very strong in security. For those of you that are sitting here as security professionals, you're thinking, this is just another one of these management pukes coming to do a presentation, knows nothing really about security. I grew up in the security world, and I'm very active with ISACA, which is, again, one of our sponsors. Or anybody from the local, what we're doing is insufficient in its extent. Would you agree? Had anybody seen this already? I mean, this is really quite remarkable. Now, with that said, and again, this is one of those comments that I hope doesn't come back to get me. It wasn't long ago that I was speaking with an executive from the Office of Civil Rights who was talking about the fact that even though there's all these threats of audits and penalties, there's only been about 16 fines actually levied of any significance for violations. So I think part of the reason that the industry has not taken the drastic steps that you would anticipate they would is because although the threat has been there, and many speakers will talk about, enumerate what those threats are, the fact is that there haven't been a lot of these fines that have been imposed, and as a result, I don't think there's been enough sting or teeth yet to the law to mandate a little bit closer adoption. But again, that's my opinion. I do want to talk a little bit about the Omnibus Rule. I took the time to brief the executive team at Parkland, and so that they would know what was involved. And I think it's worth talking about a few of these points before we move on to talk about security. So the background, I think everyone in this room knows, essentially this new rule, once promulgated, there was a 180-day roll-in period. We were told in March it's coming and it's going to be effective in September. And as predicted, September, it went into effect. It wasn't extended. And so now we're in this new period of oversight. Now, the fundamental difference, for those of you that don't have it especially clear, the fundamental difference is the shift between going from the harm standard, or essentially determining if there was harm, to focusing on whether there's information that has been compromised. And that subtle difference is what's ushered in this new era of highly scrutinized activity. The burden of proof is on the covered entity that there is low probability. And low probability, by the way you demonstrate low probability is, as I'm sure some of our vendor sponsors that are here perhaps are involved in this space, the way you demonstrate low probability is through conducting, anybody? Risk assessments, audits, precisely. So if you haven't conducted it, if you don't have it ready to produce, then you're in a situation where you have no choice but to declare a breach. And business associates are individually accountable as well. That doesn't, as a covered entity, that doesn't exclude me, but the business associate also bears the burden of potentially being individually accountable as well. I've noticed in the last, in the last month, I've noticed several emails and news bulletins that have gone out where different vendors and even some of the individuals in the provider space, peers of mine, have declared that business associates is this new area that we need to be highly focused and concerned on. And I see that later on, we also are going to be talking about the medical device issue in the FDA, which is very, very timely. I think it's a great insight. Business associates in particular, the Office of Civil Rights in very public statements has made it evident that they're aware of the fact that business associates are lagging behind in terms of their control environment and their capacity to manage the risk associated with breaches and data disclosure. Covered entities rarely have audit programs for business associates. For some time, I was essentially out talking to different vendors and different providers and publications, anybody that would listen to me, promoting the idea that we need to be, as covered entities, we need to be more aggressive in developing audit programs for our business associates. Developing a risk-ranked inventory of all your business associates. Which ones do you exchange the most information with, or that have the greatest access to your information? Risk-rank them from the greatest risk to the lowest risk, and then immediately attack the top 5 or 10 or 15, and develop, even if you don't have a formal audit program, develop a mindset that you're going to go to them and say, you know, show me when you did the last risk assessment, show me when you did the last security check, show me your policies and procedures, show me how you're monitoring, show me where your controls are, and are they being effective? Business associates of ours, if they want our business, they need to be able to comply with that. Very few organizations have audit programs that are directed at their business associates. If you're sitting here as a provider and you don't know confidently that you're managing that, I'm here to tell you that's one of those risk vectors that is going to come back to get you. Business associates must have, that have contracting with subcontractors must build that contracting as strictly as those that the covered entity has with the business associate. So if you contract with a business associate and they in turn contract with someone else, for example, very common in the revenue cycle collection space where your accounts go to a particular business associate who in turn uses a different business associate, that needs to be considered as well. And your business associate agreement should reflect this. Again, I'll make another one of those comments and may come back to get me some of the more expert speakers that are going to follow me. I personally have encouraged our attorneys and our legal team to build indemnification language into our business associate agreements, which most organizations in the business associates agreements that I have looked at don't include indemnification language. If you don't know or you're not sure, raise the question with your team. I think it's time well spent. And to go back to the earlier point that I made, this is Leon Rodriguez, the director of the Office of Civil Rights. And when he was asked, just point blank, listen, what do we as providers need to do? His answer was risk analysis, risk analysis, risk analysis. I mean, that's a direct quote. The point is that we don't know where the risk is, and if we don't take the time to develop a program, we're not going to be successful in managing this risk. Again, reflecting back to my earlier comments, the fact that there haven't been a lot of fines that have been levied, I think as an industry has lulled us into a sense of, I don't know, a sense of we're fearless in a way. It's just not going to happen to us. But I think we need to really focus our energies there. Some notable comments. 115 audits completed in 2012 by the Office of Civil Rights. I don't have any statistics for 2013, but I know they've been busy. There continue to be significant and persistent trends in regards to breaches, as evidenced by the slide that I started out with, where here we have 5 major breaches, and those were not Mickey Mouse organizations that were listed there. We're talking about top-notch thought leaders in our business, and they're the ones that are having these issues. There have been some notable fines, but really not a lot of them. There's generally an accepted sentiment that the level of auditing by the OCR and by the feds is going to increase, and that penalties and violations will accordingly increase as well. But the fact of the matter is that that still has to develop. And lastly, this whole issue of willful neglect, even though a lot of penalties have not been levied, the issue of willful neglect is very, very evident in much of what I have read, where the emphasis is going to be on punishing those that most overtly are guilty of willful neglect. Willful neglect basically means I knew that I was at risk. I knew that I had a problem. I knew that I should have done it, and I just chose not to do it because I wanted to save money or focus on something else or whatever. So on that point, and with those thoughts behind me, I'm going to jump over to security. I want to be mindful of the time, and I'd love to have time to have a few Q&As afterwards. But I do want to take my CIO hat off for a second and put on my CSO hat and talk a little bit about security, which is an area of great interest to me and hopefully to you as well. Now, this is a snippet that I took from my cell phone as well, just a couple of days ago. Now, I know there's going to be folks here saying, you're making this up. This is nonsense, okay? This is not nonsense, right? So I'm big on Twitter. I follow all kinds of people and organizations. I don't personally do a lot of tweeting. I'm not interested in disclosing things about myself. But those that are willing to disclose, I'm always willing to listen. It's just part of what it takes to be educated. Now, this individual, and I blocked out the names to do my best to protect it, even though this is public domain information, so there's no confidentiality issue. This poor woman photographs her new credit card, and she actually says, and by the way, the PIN code is like my birthday, 527, and then she tweets it. Look, there is no security control in the world that's going to defeat this. And the interesting thing is, look at the number of retweets, 4,200 retweets, and 1,437 people flagged it as a favorite. Now, this isn't a matter of a couple of days. And these are the real responses. I didn't block out their names, but immediately you see, hi, I saw your credit debit card photo. You should cancel that card. And here's a link, by the way. Go learn something, which I thought was great. And man, you even gave me the code for it. Hell yeah, I'm going to go get a PS4. The point is that your workforce is comprised of people like this and like-minded. It's just amazing the level of carelessness that we're guilty of. It's just frightening. So, I took these snippets because I thought contextually there's no better way for me to deliver the message than by showing you, the kind of things that I'm exposed to. The idea that our employees are well educated and know to behave in an appropriate way is something that we all assume. Phishing scams, as you know, that is, in my opinion, probably the top security exploit vector right now. And, the thoughts are, well, how do we prepare for phishing? And, without putting anyone here on the spot, I would imagine that in your organizations, you've taken steps to address phishing. And so to that end, I can tell you that I have actually hired an organization to come in and develop mock phishing scams to direct at my workforce. Okay, now is there anybody else here that's done that in their organization? Mock phishing attacks? Couple of hands? Great. I promise you that you're going to be doing more of this, because there is no more effective way to determine what your risk is. This is kind of a risk analysis. So, and what it consists of is you basically set up a shell website and you send out an email to your workforce that you write that directs them to your shell website to see if your employees are going to fall for it. And if they fall for it, then you deal with it and come up with statistics. I can tell you that I was involved with one very recently with a group very close to me, and these are individuals that I know and trust well, and I helped them put something together. And of the sample group, this was a random sample group, of the sample group of 120 people, there were almost 70 people that followed the link on the email. Following the link on the email resulted in malware being installed on their machine, which subsequently was used in 20-some-odd cases to gain remote access of the machine without the individual being aware of it. So phishing, the phishing attack vector exploit, one is installing malware and taking control of the machine or mining the machine for data. So almost 70 people out of 120 in the workforce clicked on that link. There was like 5 people that called the help desk and said, I got this email, I'm not sure, and like another 5 that sent it to the CSO and said, I got this email that looks suspicious, but the rest of them, the vast majority clicked on it. So having malware installed on your machine is one of those risks. And the second risk, which I want you to consider as you prepare and develop something for your organization, is and this was the second phishing attack that we directed at this organization, essentially got the individual to click a link and go to a website that we set up where we asked them to give us their username and password. You've seen these help desk phishing emails or your bank email. Give us your username or log in here so that we can test, and people just put in their username and password. And the numbers of people that fell for that was just as high. And so the net result there is you don't have malware installed on your machine, but you have just willingly forfeited your credentials. And because most organizations don't have a real solid control around administrative privilege and things like that, yielding your credentials oftentimes will yield a significant level of access to your resources. So that's two different exploit vectors associated with phishing that manifest themselves in two different ways and introduce a significant level of risk two different ways. If you're not planning on how you're going to address this, your biggest risk is not being addressed. Don't be impressed when your security people tell you, yeah, we've got WebSense to filter the web content, you can't mount the flash drive on this computer, and all these other wonderful DLP solutions or brilliantly engineered things. I want you to remember the picture of the tweet. The biggest problem is not the computer or the software or the technology. It's the biological entity attached to it. I do want to talk a little bit about the ecosystem because I think that there's some thought-provoking aspects to the ecosystem that are worth talking about. Now, this is a little diagram that my CSO, our CSO, James Carpenter, put together for me. And essentially, what this is depicting is the fact that when devices come into your organization, and presumably this falls under the umbrella of BYOD, which is this whole obsessive conversation that's going on around, are we or aren't we going to, to bring the BYOD world, whether they're your employees or your visitors or whoever, this is a given. It's just a given. It's done. The real question is, how well do we understand it and how well do we manage it? What I intend to communicate here is, first of all, that you really have devices that oftentimes will have multiple channels out of the device, multiple network connections that can exist out of the device, and as a result, they can easily be talking to the internet at the same time that they're talking to your internal network or to your guest network or whatever. So, and different devices and different OSs and different MDMs create different circumstances, so it's not an absolute. But the point is that you have to know. You have to know. And those devices establish these pervasive communication channels, right? So if you have an iPhone and you went to Twitter and you went to this and you went to that, all those applications are still running and all those channels are still active, right? We know that. That's why the battery drains so fast, right? So those parallel channels are still active while you have a device potentially that's connecting to your network, whether through your public domain network or otherwise. I'm not really convinced, and I haven't seen a lot of strong evidence, and this is not an invitation for 10 vendors to come and tell me about how their solution does this, but I'm not convinced that cross-application exploits are not possible, where you have a particular persistent connection associated with a particular application that has learned how to either read, manipulate, dump, extract from memory, or to be able to, on a parallel basis, cross-talk with another application. And I'm not alone in this sentiment. There's security professionals, true bona fide security professionals that live and die within the world of security that feel the same way, that are just absolutely paranoid about the risk that this is introducing to the organization. So think about that. I mean, if you've got all these pervasive channels and this device you're now letting connect to your network, or you're allowing them, even if they're just buffering data related to your patients, even if it's not being stored, if it's something that's being managed and monitored in memory, you have to be concerned. So I don't have the answer to that problem. My point here is to raise a level of awareness associated with it, because the technology, paradoxically, we have technology being built that's so sophisticated that we don't have the technology to manage it. So it puts us in a position as IT leaders where we are, if you're working in a competitive market where there's other hospitals that are competing with you, and the difference between having surgeon X come to your facility versus go to another facility is the fact that they can use their iPhone or they can use their iPad or whatever. You don't have the luxury of going to your CEO and saying, hey, it's not on me, baby, this is a security issue. Because that doc is going to take his business somewhere else, and at the end of the day, if the business is not there, the revenue's not there, you're not going to have a job. So it's very difficult, but there is a very unique paradox there, that we develop technology that we don't have technology to manage. So, there are points where we can direct some level of effort at controlling it. We know that we have, on the device you can put MDM solutions. We know that on the network we can put different technologies that will monitor those channels, whether they're DLP solutions, whether it's NAC. There's a lot of solutions that we can deploy. And then similarly, back end, where your data is and where your applications are, there's technologies that we can bring to bear, things like virtual machine technology, virtual PCs, or Citrix, which instantiate and abstract the session away from the actual device and the source of the data, provide some level of protection, but nevertheless, it still requires purposeful design and management to ensure that you don't have a security risk there. So there is no silver bullet. Each organization has to determine, where the business need is, what is the business and mission values that you have to engineer and architect your solutions to, and then direct your efforts in that regard. But there's a number of places that we can go and deal with minimizing it. Eliminating it is just not, I don't think that's a reality. As I mentioned, session abstraction is one of the ways to approach that. DLP solutions, both inbound and outbound, MDM solution on devices. Is there anyone here that's been able to effectively manage in their well, I shouldn't do that either, shouldn't single you out, but the question really is, all of these cloud-based storage, the drop boxes of the world, I've yet to meet a peer of mine that I've said, have you been able to, either through policy or technology or process, nullify that risk vector? And everyone they look around before they answer to make sure nobody sees them. No. It's a big problem. It's a big, big problem. And every day there's somebody new in this space. So if we don't stay informed, and if we're not connected and you're not listening to what's going on in the industry, your security person in your organization should be one of those individuals that is out there listening, learning, reading every single day. I mean, it's just moving that fast. I'm going to stop on that note. I think that's the appropriate time accorded here. I'd love to speak to you about any of the topics that we've been talking about, or expand on any of them. If there are any questions for me, I'd be happy to entertain.